I'm excited to share a little bit about the work that I have been doing, the research work that I have been doing over the last, 4 or 5 years. And it will be me offering, some ideas from my work, but it will also be you and the interaction between us that will make that a rich exchange and interaction with experts, with coaches that know what is going on outside in the workplace and what the challenges are for leaders. So, let's keep it interactive. I will be sharing my screen, collect questions in the chat box, and let's give it a start. So I hope everyone can see what I can see, really big in front of me. The title of today, yes, the title of today's session and the yin and yang was something, that seemed interesting because it crosses also cultural boundaries, and it speaks very well to what is going on in today's working places, the paradoxes. What we will be doing today, just to frame and contract a little bit, it's around raising awareness. So I will be sharing what I have become aware in my research, what I think is relevant. You can also bring what you have, seen and what is interesting from your perspective, and all of that will make that really interesting mix. We will do some reflection on the role that coaching plays in the development of leadership in contemporary workplaces, and we will also reflect a little bit at the end how the role of coaches and coaching might change looking into the future. So that's a little bit a summary of what we are going to do today. I'll start sharing a little bit for the first 10-15 minutes. Then we'll have breakout room conversations, as also Nicola and Cheryl said. From those breakout room conversations, we will be bringing back new information. I will add onto that information, put the next layer on, and then we'll have the second breakout. The end will synthesize and wrap up. And then, of course, saying farewells, and those that would like to stay for networking can stay an optional 30 minutes. So that's the flow. I work a lot with conversational intelligence, and double clicking is a term that was coined by Judith E. Glaser, and I would like to double click on the yin and yang because sometimes it is important that we know what we are talking about. So when I'm speaking about the yin and yang, it's about these opposing forces. As something is very light, something is very dark. Sometimes it's talked to as female and male, active or passive. So it's these opposites that is incorporated in the yin and in the yang. In my research, some of you maybe remember I talked at a Global Dialogue series in the middle of my research journey, and I looked at the paradoxes of hybrid work environments, and it was in the summer of 2023, I think. And it was all about these, should we work on site? Should we work remote? Is there something in jobs that makes it more approachable for remote work? Or are there jobs that make it more difficult for remote work? So it was about on-site, remote, preferences, practicalities. It was about job choices in those days. And also a little bit about money. It was in those days when companies were making their first attempt to take people back into the workplace by really making a difference between the money that people would receive for the same work they would be doing. So those are yin and yang situations in today's presentation. It is also looking at the yin and yang from a Chinese culture perspective. Because in Chinese, in this Chinese concept, we look at the interdependence between those forces. Yeah, neither force can exist without the other. They are interconnected. They are inseparable. And on top of it comes that these forces, these dimensions, are in a dynamic state. They are moving. They are changing. And that very much relates for me to what is happening in the world right now. There is nothing that is static anymore. All of the moving parts, they are in flux. And we need to bring balance and harmony into that very dynamic state. And so for me, that was why I called this presentation the yin and yang of leadership in those work environments. It's about these opposing factors, how they are connected, how they are in motion with one another, and how to balance all of that. That does not sound easy. And so before we go into what I have discovered, I would like to see what you think, what you have experienced. And in chat, I would like you to share what opposing balances and forces do you experience in your work with leaders? And I put this into chat so that we see what you have to add to that question. Speed versus precision. Okay. Money versus people. Do more with less. Yeah. Being impartial and inclusive. Metrics versus purpose. Oh yeah, the chat box is moving fast. Fast and right, trusting and distrusting. Interesting, very, very interesting. Keep those yin and yangs coming. Compassion, holding the space. Yeah, wow. Lots of yin and yangs. So when I looked at these yin and yangs, thank you for sharing that with me. When I shared or looked at the yin and yangs, the gray literature lens comes first, because the gray literature, what is gray literature? Not everyone might be familiar with the term. Gray literature are these World Economic Forum reports, are the Gallup State of the Workplace reports. Is well-researched stuff, but not necessarily peer-reviewed. So in academia, I was only allowed for my doctoral research to use limited amount of gray literature. Because with gray literature, you cannot really guarantee the rigor that should be behind it. But it's the literature that is out in the field. That is the literature that your customers and my customers know in the workplace. Corporate clients read these reports. And so what we find in gray literature in terms of those yin and yangs are the uncertainty that is out there in the world. We cannot make long-term plannings anymore. The world is being more and more fragmented. There is the technological changes, AI as one of the top, voices in that technology room. Back in those days when I started, it was working remotely was a big thing, because only very selected few people had the chance to do that before the pandemic had hit. And technology was boosted in that time, was really pushed ahead. Without the pandemic, I believe we wouldn't be where we are right now with some technological advancements. Then we've got the multi-generational workplace, demographic shifts. Sometimes we have 4 or 5 generations in the workplace. We've got conflicts arising from those differences in the way work is approached, work is seen, the purpose is seen that we need in order to perform well. Then we've got on the other side talent scarcity, skill gaps. Talent scarcity connects with the demographic shifts. So a big amount of the workforce is leaving workplaces and not enough new, fresh workforces are joining. So there is a decline in engagement, especially among managers. And what one has seen, and what makes me really think in terms of the work that we do, we have seen the last bullet point here, a continued decline in well-being among managers versus those that they are leading. They see slight improvements with the individual contributors. So that might make us aware of how much care has been put into the workforce as such, and how little care leaders are willing and can take for themselves. So it's maybe also something we will be looking at. So that's what gray literature suggests in terms of what is happening in current contemporary workplaces for leaders. It's nicely packaged here on this bullet point list. It's nicely structured, but it's not always as structured. It's not always as clearly cut as in those bullet points. We sometimes have blurred vision, as in this image created from all of the words from that bullet point list. These phenomena, they do not show up neatly packaged. They show up interconnectedly. They show up in a messy stage. They show up, in different areas. In team coaching, Peter Hawkins, I think, talks about working with the interfaces because these are the critical areas where things are not maybe working as well. Dan Siegel speaks about integration, linking of differentiated components of a system. And this is what I see in that blurred vision. We've got these compartments. Our brains need structure. They need to know where something belongs. But in reality, it's a big mishmash. It's a big, mass that cannot be always clearly separated. And we need to link what belongs together. We need to make connections in order to work with the yin and the yang and the messiness that sometimes is out there in those workplaces with leaders, for leaders that we also work with. On top of that, topics that I found in my work when I was looking at my data, I found also two sides of the coin, let's say. There was one side where those that I collected data from said, there is a task side of leadership. There is the expectation from a manager or towards a manager to be an expert in a certain field, especially when we talk about informal leadership. So in my research, leaders were both managers with, responsibility for people, but also leaders in terms of their subject matter fields, project managers, technical experts. So there was a very well-defined area where they were leaders because people could come to them because they had knowledge, they had information, they could help them and support them. They could make decisions in difficult, situations, doing this, recommending that. They were seen as drivers, as achievers. And with that side of leadership, many can work, especially experts, because that is their subject matter. When we go to the other side, the human side of leadership, where people really said, in these new work areas, we need leaders to bring people together because the world is fragmented. We work not always in the same place. We are physically away, apart from one another because of the new workplace settings. So the leader also has the task to bring people together, to create a sense of community among people, but also a sense of belonging that is connected to what is it that we are trying to achieve as a team, as a company. They want to have guides, they want to have coaches. And these two sides of the leadership medal are also yin and yang. Yeah, you cannot just have one, you need both. How do you mix it? How do you balance these two sides? And what about the leaders and their own needs? And so we can see that the topic of leadership in contemporary workplaces has many facets. Yeah? It's about human needs, it's about work needs, it's about skills, it's about competencies. And before we start a first breakout room conversation about the yin and yangs, let's see if there are any comments, questions that I should be aware of before we explore in smaller groups what you have seen as the yin and yang. So Nicola, Cheryl, do you have any information from the chat box? Because I couldn't look at the chat box while I was talking. Are there any questions, any interesting comments?
I think there were still people actually sharing the yin and yang that they were seeing in their work. That carried on for quite some time. So I don't see any immediate questions though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I can see from Sarah that's fascinating, considering a leader as an expert versus a technical expert becoming a generic leader. The transition often generates challenges, right? And those people that are technical expert that have a lot of knowledge about the subject matter, the core of the business, let's say, very rarely get leadership training in terms of how to work with people. What else is needed other than the expertise that they bring? And that also adds to the challenges in today's workplace. Where does management come in? Yeah, Esther, interesting question. Where does management come in? What management are we talking about? Is it HR management, management in the direct line? If you like, you can unmute and we can double click on what it means for you, where management comes in.
On one hand, people management, on the other hand, task management, and management between leaders and people.
Yeah, yeah. It's all management, and that type of management sometimes it needs training, helping people to gain skills and competencies in those areas that they are not so familiar with. And sometimes, it's just framing the expectation, what is expected from them. And that is something that I have seen in my research coming up again and again. Our expectations clearly voiced, and where could we be better at being clear what is expected of an informal leader in particular, in comparison to someone who has a positional power leadership position through, I can see your thumb that's exactly it, where there is a void, there is a gray zone that needs more clarity, more transparency. Okay.
Yeah, and there was a comment that earlier that we missed from Mariella Patiki about the old way of managing and being expected to lead, the being rather than being actually aligned with a true leadership mentality. So there's an old way of managing and stereotype, I guess, of what a true leader is versus other ways, and it relates to what you were just saying on your slide, I think.
Yeah, so it's also probably going in that driver direction, actually telling people what to do, what's the next step, this is what you need to do. It's top down, old style, old school. And it still has a place today. But not only. And we have to look where it is appropriate, which style is appropriate with which group of people, in which context. And it's not a simple topic. There is not just one right answer in that conversation. And I can see Andrea, you are having your hand right up there. Good to see you. Hello.
Good to see you too. Speaking of mindset, looking at people as resources and mentally having them in the same category with technical resources, with whatever, versus looking at people as human beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we have a question from Nawal about managers expected to manage or lead with AI, the new expectations around there. David talks about the employee expectations shifting around well-being, work-life balance, progression, etc. Yeah, we're getting quite a few comments now. The conversation is enriching. Multiple generations, about focusing on the metrics versus focusing on spending time building a foundation and an inclusive culture.
Yeah. As you said, Cheryl, the conversation is just emerging, and maybe that's a good time to open up the first breakout room. I will share what I have in mind for you in that breakout room. So keep on reflecting, keep on exchanging which yin and yang forces are most present in your contemporary leadership experience for your client, from the different lenses that I presented, but also, of course, from your lenses, not just from the gray literature, not just from my findings, but also from what you have seen. So what are these forces? Continue the conversation in your breakout rooms. I think 20 minutes we'll have. And it would be great if in every breakout room at the end, there could be one person that either shares in chat when they come back or opens the microphone and fills us a little bit in on what was discussed, so that we are not, left in the unknown about these interesting side discussions that are happening outside. So there are people that are in a state of confusion. Sorry, Esther, not clarity. Internal compass. Wow, yeah. To be influenced by others. That's an interesting one to pick up on. Tineke, is that, I say the name correctly? I always say we need to be open to influence. So
yeah, no, we are open. So
yeah.
I can share about that, if I may, Ute.
Yeah.
I am an authentic leadership coach, and so often I'm not saying let's not be influenced by others, but you also have to offset that influence by others who don't always have either the know-how or the best intentions. Offset it against an internal compass, and I help my clients to build an internal authentic leadership compass to guide them, which is a values-driven and purpose-driven compass, so that whenever you do get external input, you actually can check it against your own compass and say, do I believe this is right, or am I, otherwise it's going to be blown around by the wind? Because when we talk about political acumen, we're in a political playing field, corporate political playing field all the time, and not all of it's always very pure and for the best of whatever. So I think for leaders to have an internal compass to guide them as well, and to help them to have the courage to stand up for what they believe and what the experience has shown them, is very helpful in this complex organizational world. So I hope I've explained it a little bit.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Thank you. I will have a lot to do tonight reading the chat box. It's, wow, interesting information in there. You had great conversations I can read.
Does anyone else like to share any of their points? You need to unmute your microphone, as Tineke did.
Hi, this is Gosia or Małgorzata. We've been discussing quite a lot where it comes to the ever-changing leadership requirements and difficulties with adapting to different generations that are currently in the workplace. And we've also touched upon the authentic leadership and that people are sometimes disconnected from their personal values, which builds a barricade, and they are just not able to lead others if they are themselves not knowing where they are going.
Interesting what you said, that the ever-changing requirements, the ever-changing skills, expectations. I saw one comment also here, the last one in the chat box, and it has been moving again. So someone wrote something about skills and what is it that leaders should develop? What is at the forefront other than, being authentic, having that inner compass? And I think that's a good moment in time to just continue a little bit with my input, because time is just racing and I would like to offer a second breakout room to you. So let's take a look at what is it that literature said, what competencies, what skills are needed for contemporary leaders. And I'm advancing, I hope everyone can see what I can see. Yes, okay, good. So one really valuable paper that I read, and you will be getting all of these, links to the resources, was an overview from this person here, Nigayo Futso. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. He looked at leadership competencies for the 21st century. And the overview that I'm sharing here is an interesting overview, because the distinction is between skills that are new competencies and where competencies were added. So you can see here, for instance, something printed in bold and italic are competencies in an existing field around values that were added by his research. And then there are boxes here, the gray boxes are entirely new set of competencies that were identified from the research that was done. And so the ever-changing landscape of what is required, what is expected by leaders, connecting with what was shared by, one breakout group discussion, this is real, this is there. And but it's not, it's building on existing values, it's building on existing competencies and seeing what needs to be added. So that is one lens. Another lens that I came across was that is a summary of what Ngozi Futso said about the traditional leadership style and the e-leadership style. So adding these new categories, and I spoke to that. The other point that was really interesting was Ahuya et al. They found 3 critical success factors, and technology being one of them. We work in environments where leaders cannot lead anymore without being savvy in technology, managing technology, not just using, clicking a link to enter a Zoom call or an MS Teams call, but they also need to know how to use these platforms to bring people together, to make things happen, to make sure that new tools, new technology supports what leaders and teams are trying to achieve from a task level, but also on a motivational and well-being level, bringing people together. He also speaks about, or they speak about change management theories. So looking at change, not just through the traditional lens, but what does it mean to transition something in the company when not everyone is in the same physical location anymore. That does require a little bit of adaptation, a little bit of different skills, different approaches. And all of these quotes are from my thesis. I'm not sure if I said it in the beginning. It's not yet fully published. In the next 2 or 3 weeks, this handle that I'm sharing here, the embargo will be lifted and you will be able to not just read the abstract, but the whole 200 pages if you want to do that. And those are some quotes from the thesis. A last paper that I found really interesting, also talking about traditional leadership and moving to leadership, was the idea of the techno-orchestrating leader. Yeah, because of the really important role technology plays nowadays in those new workplaces. And so it's not just that human side, it's technology that is always there. And again, linking and integrating not just the individual buckets, but bringing these together. What I also saw in the work that I did, reading all of these papers, looking at the data that I collected, my focus was in the end at looking at how well-being and engagement can work well in an environment where we look at teams and groups of people, and where the individual, a leader, the workforce, have own ideas. They have flexibility wishes. They want autonomy in the workplace, in the work time. So an individual has certain requirements because of their family situation, because of where they live and where their workplaces are. So they need to be able to craft their jobs in a special way so that they can contribute, so that they can feel well, but without negatively impacting the group, the team, the company goal as such. And that is a really fine balance to keep. So flexibility and autonomy on the one side have a direct impact on well-being and engagement on the other, both at a personal level as well as a group, team, and company level. And so as a leader, recognizing that, seeing what are the influences that bring imbalance to an ecosystem, to a system where human beings are trying to achieve something together, is crucial. And at the same time, they need to be able to see that, to address that, to communicate, and to find solutions together. And for that, skills are required, are needed. Conversations are needed. And it's important to have conversations that are difficult. Yeah? And so the question is, how can we as coaches help them with that? How can we bring the balance into those demands that individuals, team members have towards the leaders, that management has on leaders? So there is a lot to juggle. Yeah. So how do we help leaders to find that balance? How do we help leaders maybe also to make the necessary transitions in terms of from that what they call traditional leadership to e-leadership? And how might we as coaches, mentors, supervisors, how might we approach this in the future in a different way? Because also for us, the way we work with our clients have changed. Yeah. And that would be the invitation for the next breakout room conversation, unless there are questions or comments in the chat box that we should address before we send you off again.
Which type of leaders using which style? Esther is asking, who are you talking about? Which kind of leaders?
Which kind of leaders use which style? Well, I hope that depends on what style is needed. What I have seen and what I am trying to do with leaders that I work with is that they have an understanding of what maybe their personal preferred style is. Maybe they are a more coaching leader. Maybe they are a more pace-setting leader. And then reflect on when is that style useful and when does it help people to connect with that leader, and when do people need another leadership style. So it's not about this is the leadership style that is needed. It's also a variety of style, and we need to apply them as they are needed, if that answers the question. And Claudia, I see the comment about the full screen. This is all full screen that I have. I'm not in presentation mode. This is a website. It doesn't get any bigger. I hope you can see it nevertheless. Does that answer the question about which style? Whoever asked it, please unmute and let me know. We can have a conversation about that.
It was Esther who asked that.
Okay, Esther. Mhm.
Okay, I just meant there are many different types of leaders in different positions for different reasons. And I'm being challenged for finding solution to one size fits all on this.
No, no, no. There is no one size fits all. That's part of the difficulty, you know. If we could say do this and then you will get that result, it would not be as complex and complicated as it is. People do need different things, and that's also a challenge for leaders to be adaptive in that moment because they also want to have that inner compass that we heard about. They want to connect with their own needs and reflecting on what is a go-to leadership style that maybe a leader normally would apply because that is his or her style where they feel most comfortable with, might not always be the best style for the task at hand for the people they are leading. And that reflection is something we as coaches can initiate, I think. Yeah. Okay, situational leadership. Yeah, yeah. Okay. The breakout room questions clear, or is there more that we need to discuss here in the main room before we send you off again to have your own conversations?
So Ute, if I understand, the focus in the next conversation is really about the coach and how the coach is working in this situation.
Exactly, exactly. That's that is your job, our job, my job, working with leaders. And how do we do that? How do we help them best with this complex environment, with these opposing forces that they are struggling with, so that their own well-being and their own engagement does not drop any further? Because we saw in the beginning that it has been recorded that there is still a steady decline for leaders in engagement. And so yeah, let's take a look at that.
Great. Thank you, Ute. See you on the other side of the breakout rooms.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Good conversations, I hope. I had good conversations. I hope you had good conversations too. So, curious. What happened in the breakout rooms and who would like to share? We have a couple of minutes, I would say. Let's hear. How are you approaching the task, finding balance, making transitions? Chat box is moving, I can see. Wow, 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 wow. There is a lot. What is out of that? Raising awareness, I can see that. Using tools. Yes, okay. Change is a process. Yeah, and it's a journey that never ends. It always, gets new pathways. 360-degree feedback. Yeah, that's also a way of making visible what has maybe been felt but not seen, making the invisible visible. I also liked because I had time to look at the chat box while I was in the breakout room with Cheryl, and Carol wrote, leaders might need some time and opportunity for reflective practices. And yeah, Craig, I can see you nodding. We speak the same language. And so that's exactly what I had in mind when I was finishing up my research. I was thinking, how can we as coaches hold that space, challenge leaders on the one side, provide that safe space where they can explore, where they can reflect. And so I will share, as the chat box is continuing, mindful of time, I will share what I came up with. And moving my slides. So what I developed and what I cannot yet share with you because it's currently pending, with the patent office. And like I said, there is an embargo still on the thesis, which will be lifted hopefully quite soon in 2 weeks. I developed a conceptual model that is looking at how all these bits and pieces between flexibility and well-being, how are these connected through the leaders? But I also offer a full-faced framework where the idea of reflection, Carol, is at the center of it, looking at reflection in action and on action, as per Schön 10 years ago already developed and built on that. More reflection, more time to think, more distance from, the busyness of doing. A tool that can be used by leaders, by coaches, and anyone who is open to reflecting, not just for the purpose of reflection, but also in a systematic way, so that we can connect with, what did we reflect? What was the purpose of that reflection? What actions were taken on that reflection? And how is that action working or not working? So that we are not just trying trial and error, but that we approach it in a systematic way. And like I said, more of that can be found as soon as the thesis will be open for public, reading. And I will be sharing all of these resources and references and extra resources with you. And with that being said, I'm closing. I'm thanking you a lot for your interest, for your attention. And I'm here for further questions, conversations, and thank you so much for listening to my baby, my research, and what I got very, very passionate about over the last 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ute. That's a real pleasure to hear about your work and what you could share with us before it's actually published. I'm looking forward to be able to click on those links and read more of your work. And I love this idea that actually what might be a contribution to leaders is reflective learning as we use that in our own development as coaches. So thank you so much. I can see already there are people raising their hands as some people want to stay behind for our networking. But for everyone else who needs to leave right now, there's many thanks to you in the chat box, Ute. And I'm not the only one thanking you. And thank you everyone for joining us. I look forward to welcoming you to our future dialogue series sessions. Thank you very much.